the one and only Bob WP. Bob, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing good.
Oh, do that again.
Oh,
Later
that alone
on,
was worth it.
if you will let us know in the comments which Barry White hit you want Bob to cover, then he promised he will cover it right at the very end with that beautiful voice. So thank you very much in advance, Bob, for agreeing to that. Folks, if you don't know who Bob WP is, or Bob, known as Bob WP, then you can find out more over on dothewoo.io. You can find out his podcast and everything else, and Bob will get you to introduce this in a short while, but put that in your bookmarks, folks. Today, we are going to be talking about the art of the pivot. I like to call it the pirouette. Same thing. It is changing the direction of your business. The reason why we've invited Bob on the show is because Bob knows how to keep changing with the times. And to prove that, he did a podcast with me back in 2016. So if you want to check that podcast out, you can check out agencytrailblazer.com/WooCommerce-stories, where Bob shares with us his journey of pivoting through the different changes in life. So I would highly recommend you check that out. We will put a link to that in the comments as well. That was 2016, and Bob has continued to evolve with the times. So who better to talk about pivoting than Mr. Bob WP? So before we get into the questions, let's just do the quick fire round of who is who. Then we will kick on with our first question. So let's start off with our guest. Could you give us, Bob, a 30-second introduction into the world of Bob WP?
Well, been in WordPress for about 13 years. Had the Bob WP brand for 10 years. And I've done just about everything you can possibly think of with WordPress. And right now, I label myself as a publisher and podcaster, focusing on WooCommerce.
Jan.
Yeah, I am Jan. I'm the host of the WP Agency Summit starting next Monday, and I'm a Cloudways Maverick.
Peacha.
I am Peacha Neri, and I am a UX and design speaker, consultant, educator, and I also am a Cloudways Maverick.
Excellent. And my name is Lee Matthew Jackson. I am the host of the Agency Trailblazer podcast. And again, if you want to laugh at my presenting style in episode 30-something back in 2016, but enjoy the great content from Bob WP, check out that episode. Right. Okay. Enough promotion, but we wanted to make sure that you guys knew we've got the right guy in town. So, Bob, we've got a load of questions for you. This is going to be an open conversation. The three of us are really excited to learn from you, to learn from your journey. But what we're also going to be doing is encouraging people in the community who are watching this to ask you some questions. So we will bring those to you as well. And I guess the first question for you right now, being a guy who has consistently changed your business, changed your ideas, changed what you do with the times, how do you know when it is time to pivot? And I guess especially now when many industries are changing completely. For example, I'm in the events industry, and suddenly events can no longer happen.
Yeah.
So, oh my word.
It's interesting because I look at pivots as a little bit different than just, okay, I'm going to swing up totally out of the blue, something I've never done. And that's kind of like, okay, I'm launching a new business, a different brand. The pivot, I like to think of, you're kind of staying under that same brand you built, whether it's been a year or 10 years, however long. And man, it's so many things, for me, and I can get into it later. I mean, it can be burnout, added revenue, meeting a new demand for your clients. And that's what's cool about it, is they're so small or they're so large. So it's not like there's any golden rule that this is, a pivot or not. I mean, it could be, okay, I'm just tweaking this, but it's enough of an impact that you're making a pretty substantial change, or it can be, like I said, big. And my latest pivot was rather large. So I think it's natural business growth in a way. I mean, you could almost make it that it's synonymous with business growth because it is doing something. And sometimes it's also jumping out of the comfort zone a bit. and taking a chance. And I can tell you, I've taken a lot of chances, and I can say all the things I've pivoted to and how many of those no longer exist because they basically sucked or they failed or they just didn't work.
Yeah.
But I was willing to make that pivot. So I think it's there's always time to do it, and then you got to look internally. Is this such a big pivot? This is going to take too much of our bandwidth at this moment. So there's a lot of factors in play, but I think when you need to really start, the perfect time is when you start thinking about, I wonder if I should do that. Then it's time to start thinking the whole process through, and whether you make it actually happen, that's another question down the road.
I think what I'm hearing here is that there's pivot and there's pivot, if that makes sense. People will often think that a pivot is a massive 180, doing something completely different. I was building houses for a living and now I'm a butcher, or something absolutely extreme. But what I'm hearing here is that you can pivot your service offering, or you can pivot how you do something, how you deliver something. You can change slightly or you can change significantly, but the time to start considering it, I think I'm hearing, is when you start to have those thoughts, or when something no longer appears to be working.
Right. And I think like you said, it's that natural transition. And often what happens internally is a lot more dramatic than externally. And, that's kind of something we can talk about more, but it's that making that transition seem very natural to the outside, but still beneficial to whoever you're aiming it at.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just thinking as well of someone like IBM, for example. So for years, they did not do anything different but kind of the IBM PC, and they eventually stagnated. So they just thought they were going to keep doing the same thing. So originally they'd gone from being this massive business who you don't get fired for being IBM to being somebody who is irrelevant. I mean, thankfully they've kept going because they had other things going on. But when it came to the actual PC market, they completely failed. They invented an entire industry by creating the PC, and then pretty much lost it to everybody else.
Yeah, or other companies such as Kodak,
Exactly,
things like that, and that weren't able to evolve with the times. Which, Bob, that's clearly not a problem you have. So we warned you before. We said we have a list of questions, but probably we're just going to go completely off script, and it's about to happen because I have got at least 2 questions, maybe 3, before I ask you the one that we planned, because it's good to talk about a pivot, but I think that maybe not everybody knows you. I mean, you've said it's about Woo, but what are you pivoting from to? And that's my number 1 question. And the number 2, which maybe you want to answer before, is also, I don't know, up to you, but it is also what I'm curious about is, when do you pivot, or when do you add another business to your roster? Do you know what I mean? So maybe Kodak needed to pivot and they didn't, but there are other companies that didn't pivot, they just added something else, if that makes sense.
Okay, I'll take the second one, then I'll go back to the first one because I'm going to have you repeat the first one. I think it's almost that natural transition that I was talking about. And I hate to say it, but for me, it's always been a gut feeling that this is a pivot. And I think you, as a business owner, whatever, if you're individual or agency, you're going to know the difference when it hits you, because there is obviously the times that, in the current situation, I mean, there's going to be a lot more than pivoting. There's going to be restructuring careers, and that is forced by the current situation. So a lot of times I think those bigger changes often may happen more by external factors that aren't so internal. I mean, they're something has just happened, or, your market has crashed or whatever. It is time not just to pivot, it's time to rethink your whole life or your whole business career, where that pivot is that constant building upon an existing brand, an existing business. And like I said, they can be rather large, but they can't be to the point where, like Lee said, hey, I was a butcher and now I build houses or whatever. Well, that's not really, that's kind of a pivot in an odd sort of way, but it's really you've made a career change. And I think to answer that question, yeah, you're going to know it when it is time to do that twist and turn, however big that is, or a major change. And now the first question was,
can you remember the first question, Peter? And you're on mute.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Peter, you're on mute. You're on mute.
Sorry. Yeah. The first question was, God, I'm old. Well, I have another one. Do you guys don't remember either, do you?
No, we
you
weren't
don't.
listening. No.
No, we just admired Bob's voice.
I know.
We just did the same as Bob and heard the second question.
I was hypnotized by your voice, Bob. Your voice hypnotized me, and now I can't remember what the first question was. You will come back to me. So I know that Jan wanted to ask something, so you can go ahead now.
Yeah, definitely. And I wanted to tie into this internal versus external motivation that you touched upon, Bob. And I tend to agree that the internal pivots are more like these evolutions in business, like when you're learning a new skill, for example, or when you're taking on a few of the same projects, and then you see that this is a really good fit for you. This is what I would not have considered a pivot, but more like an evolution. What I'm interested in is your experience in trusting the gut feeling. Has that ever fooled you? Was there ever a time where you said, like, I really should try this, I really have this urge to try this, and then later when you're looking back at this, there were some warning signs that it probably wasn't such a smart idea to go down that route?
How much time do we have?
Yeah. No. Well, if we go on mute for the next half hour, go for it.
Yeah, no, it's oh man, there's a number of things that happened that way, and I'm just gonna pick one. I remember back in the early around 2011, maybe it was even earlier than that. I decided to create a video tutorial WordPress beginner site. Now, WP 101 was in place, and they were pretty established, and so was WP Beginner. So I looked at it and I thought, okay, I was at the point where I thought, I have this audience and they want my stuff. Well, I assumed they wanted it. And so I created this, and it was called Savvy WordPress. And I put these video tutorials up, and I got a few people that did it. And after a while, I just was, kept updating them and doing this and that. And I thought, man, and I think I believe I even talked to Sean, I said, boy, I really blew it. This is not, I need to keep going in the direction I'm going and find some other way. Because at that point, my pivot was based on added revenue. I was trying to think, how can I create revenue out of this? And I basically pulled out all that content and just threw it on my blog. And I didn't have that many people. I think I may have given some, I don't know what I gave them. I think I gave them some coaching time or something, because they'd gotten the use out of the videos. But I wanted to kind of say, thank you, this isn't going to be happening any longer. And yeah, there's been a number of those things that I just felt it was right. And I told myself, I tried to convince myself, yes, this is the direction to go, but it just, it was time to flip the switch. I'll just give you one more quick example. My wife and I did a membership site in 2008, before membership sites were cool. And we decided to do this kind of business one. And it was more based around business, not so WordPress specific. And I spent 7 months building this thing on Wishlist and Headway theme. And it was an enormous pain to create this site, a membership site back then on WordPress. And we launched it, and within 1 week of launch, after 7 months of building this thing, I looked at my wife and I said, "Do you really want to do this site?" And she said, "Nah." I said, "I don't either." And I flipped the switch on it. It was just, it was major time investment. And finally, it just, once it was launched and out there in the wild, and at that particular moment in time, it just didn't feel right. And I thought, I'm not going to beat this thing. I'm not going to just hope and pray. I'm flipping the switch and moving on.
I think there's such a big lesson in this. And actually, this makes me feel so much better, because over the past few years, I've done a few of those. I spent so many man hours on projects that then further down the line, I just said, this is wrong. It's just not going to work. I don't want it. And so it makes me feel much better, because I thought there was something wrong with me, but you're saying that that's the nature of entrepreneurship, basically, and we shouldn't worry about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
and if I made you feel good about yourself, my job is done here. So that's good.
Yeah. So I've remembered the question. So basically, the question was, because we started, it was triggered by the fact that we started talking about pivoting before we actually said, what are we pivoting from? So you have now said a few things that you have pivoted from. But what I'm curious about, because I don't know you as well as Jan and Lee do, I really am very curious to find out because you're in the middle of a pivot, aren't you? That's why we're talking about it. So I'd love to know what you're pivoting from and to.
At this current point in time?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So what I'm pivoting from is I've been publishing a lot about WooCommerce over the last, I'd say, 4 or 5 years. And I've been using WooCommerce since 2011 when it came out. So it's been a natural transition as my site grew and grew. Beginning of last year, I made bobwp.com. I kept the domain and everything in the brand, obviously, but I made it BobWP at Do the Woo, which is my podcast about WooCommerce. And at this one point now, I've decided to make this, which is probably one of the largest pivots I made, speaking of large pivots in years. I'm putting BobWP brand. It's still happening. I'm still BobWP. That's not going to change, but that site's going to set aside. And I've moved the Do the Woo brand, or the Do the Woo concept, over to an entire new site. And where the big pivot for me on that particular piece is that after 13 years, I decided after burnout that I didn't want to write one more WordPress tutorial post in my life. I just told myself it's over with. I've done so many of these things. I'm just grudgingly pushing these things out. So I had to go through some evaluation. What do I do? So I'm pivoting from being more of a content producer, taking that content production, and now I'm bringing it to pulling a site to make a cohesive space for WooCommerce builders. And so I'm going to be more focused on, the kind of the standard terms connection and communication and perspective, insight, and everything. So it's all about the community now, more so than just pumping out content on how to use this plugin. So that's the transition I made, or the pivot I made currently or recently.
So you'll be a facilitator.
Yeah, facilitator. So it's just a lot of different information. It's just keeping people informed on what's happening in that WooCommerce space.
I'd love to just pick up on something that you mentioned, which was the burnout. And I get that it could be a bit of a personal question, but if you could share a little bit about that to help others. I know a lot of people hit burnout quite easily. You'd said earlier that it's okay to stop something. You talked about that website you did with your wife, 7 months of loads and loads of work. Clearly that was burning you guys out, and eventually you said, you know what, sod this, let's pull the plug. So we already know from what you've said, it's okay to actually stop something if it's not going to work out. But do you mind kind of sharing with us, what were those signs for you of burnout? Because I think when you are hitting a point of burnout, it is a clear sign that what you are doing is not working for you, and there needs to be change, either the mini pivot, just change a few things to improve your life, or the major pivot.
Yeah. It's interesting because, everybody, it's an easy thing to fall back on burnout, burnout, I'm burned out, I got to move on.
Yeah.
And I think it's too easy sometimes. So it's not just that you're, a little bit frustrated, you're kind of exhausted, it's really truly for me, it gets to a point of just, I do not like doing this anymore, and it's not helping anybody. So I'll go back to one thing is in 2013 or 14, I had been designing WordPress sites. Previous to WordPress, I had 17 years in the marketing and design business. So I designed, in the days we were talking about this pre-show, a print. So I designed and I worked with clients. So probably a total of, almost 25 years or 23 years of working client work. Mm. And I got burnout. I said, if I have to do and deal with one more client, it's not going to serve them any good. It's not going to serve me any good. I just, every time somebody sends me a request for a job, I groan. I don't, I don't even want to deal with this. I do not want, but it was the money. So that was a true burnout for me and one of my pivots. And this with the content, it was the same thing. I mean, I've written a lot of content, and there was times that, I was going through the motions. Sometimes, it comes natural after a while. You just pump out the content. But it was getting again to the point where I'd sit down and just take a deep breath and look at it and think, here I go again. And then I started thinking, I started looking at some of my content, and I feel like it was still, helpful, but I was not writing as long a posts. There was signs to me, okay, I'm kind of taking shortcuts here, and that's telling me something. And I knew I needed to keep doing it to kind of continue what I was doing it, but I had to find that other sweet spot. So it took me a little bit of time to reevaluate. But it's that point where you just, I just can't take it anymore. And sometimes that's easier said than done because there's that money. And I've been there. I probably have worked a bit more into things or on things just like everybody else. But, that point where you start doing that, you need to really start looking at how can I make this transition, and how can I carry through really obviously what I feel and people feel I'm pretty good at, but do it in another way that will kind of give me a new boost of energy.
I was talking today about oh, sorry, 1 second. I was talking today about when should I give up? Like, what should I do when I feel like giving up? And I was just picking up on something you said there. The burnout. There's two kind of scenarios, isn't there? There is that, I really don't like this right now, which is usually based on stress and emotion. Or there is, I can no longer do this. This is killing me. This is like, I don't find this enjoyable. So I would repeat what Bob is saying here. When you feel like you're burning out, first of all, check the emotional factors and just make sure that it's not a reaction to things being bad now, but you still love the thing, versus you hate the thing, it's time to move on. Sorry, Jan, keep going, mate.
I would just add to that. I've been there too, when there was a time where I just couldn't do what I was doing anymore, and it was draining my energy. And as soon as I made that decision that I would change something, even if it wasn't immediate, because there's still, as you said, Bob, you need the money coming in probably. It takes time to pivot. It takes time to change. So it's not something you can do from one day to another. But as soon as you make the decision, that is when energy sets free, from my experience. And this is when you find new joy in life, even to get philosophical here. I'm wondering, Bob, how do you prepare when you're pivoting? Like, you are launching a new website today. So first of all, kudos for being with us on a launch day. How do you prepare yourself to make sure that the pivot goes smoothly?
Yeah, it's so first thing I'm going to tell everybody not to do, don't crowdsource your idea, your pivot idea. Don't put it in a Facebook group and say, hey, everybody, should I do this? Because then you're going to spend the next week just sorting out emotions from that entire conversation.
People are cruel.
Yeah, they are. Or
So
they promise
so
everything.
you don't recommend the ask method?
You know, I don't, because I've had
When
so
you-
many people. I remember one experience, somebody told me, they said, you know, I went to a Facebook group, I suggested this, and everybody was excited about it and all this stuff. And I've heard this many times since then. And this was a few years ago. And he said, I launched it, and all these people are so excited about it. Nobody shared it. Nobody bought it. Nobody, you know, it was a false impression that he got, that these people were like suddenly his fans, and yeah, we'll be there for you. And they, you know, they almost come across that way in the conversations. And it's like, then you launch it and then it just, you know, quiet, crickets. And it's like, whoa, okay, where did all these people go, even for added support or something? So it's, I've found that I just refrain from doing it. And sometimes when I see people do it, I just cringe, because you know, I myself, one of the things I did leading into it is I spent the last 2 months in tons of conversations one-on-one with colleagues and peers, good friends, and just said, here's my idea. I want you to, you know, what do you think about this? And we talked about, they came up with some added ideas. So that was one way I prepared, because I had it already, the ideas down, but it was so much more useful. I selected people I knew that would give me an honest opinion, that experience, rather than just a squandering of random people that I don't know where they're coming from or the heads are at. So that's one way that I prepare. Internally, it depends on what you're doing. So I can't even really touch on that, because, you know, you got to do it all internally. Externally, you want to make sure it's seamless, kind of like what I've talked about before. You want to make sure that my pivot right now, the fact that I quit writing tutorials after 13 years is huge for me. I mean, I've been the last 3 weeks, or whenever I last wrote one, 4 weeks, I've been just like, oh God, I don't have to write anything today like this. I don't have to look at a plugin and write about it. That was, you know, huge. Outside looking in, people are saying, hey, this transition is normal for Bob. This makes sense. Nobody's just, you know, thrown back. So I prepared for that, ease into it externally. Internally, it was a lot of work. It's a lot of, you know, just like any kind of thing you do that's fairly big, it's going to be internally. I also say plan it the same as you would a launch. Plan it the same as you would creating a new product, you know, or even making a change in your career. Think of it in that sense, again, internally, and how you convey that out in a natural way that, yeah, you know, things are changing, whatever, but not that, whoa, everybody, look what I'm doing now. I'm crazy. I'm, you know, crazy Bob running around the corners. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to do this time. It's got to come across. So I make sure, and I prepare everybody around me with tweets, through social, whatever, just little hints, you know, oh, I'm doing this. And by the time it launches, it's not this big surprise, because I don't want anybody to be going like, whoa, Bob, what are you doing now? You know, I sent out several emails this morning. I got back, oh, this is great. This makes sense. You know, and they weren't like, what happened, Bob? You're not writing tutorials anymore. They don't even know that, really, you know, or they, you know, don't care really. So that seamlessness is really important. And again, planning it just like it's another big launch. Even the small pivots, kind of take them as, you know, this is a fairly major thing I'm doing, and let's make sure it's done right.
That is really, really helpful. And I think You have to find a balance there, because I would definitely be somebody who goes too much into planning, and then it's almost this analysis paralysis by analysis state where you just try to compensate for every little thing that can go wrong or eventually might go wrong. And what I've learned over the past years is things will go wrong when you pivot, and you just have to learn how to deal with that.
Exactly. Yep. I've been there more times than I care to even admit.
So I find this all really, really fascinating, because it sounds like, I mean, you said you started with print. I also started with print. And I guess I've been through, I didn't call them pivots, but I've also been through pivots. But I really would like to know more about the new thing, about the new venture, because you did explain that you are going to be more of a curator, a facilitator for other people to talk about, because you don't want to do tutorials anymore. So you don't want to be the one teaching. You want to make it possible for other people to teach. Did I get it right?
Right.
Great. So tell us more about it. How is it going to work? You're launching today. Does it mean it already has loads of content in it?
Yes, it does, because a lot of the information was portaled. So Bob WP had the Do the Woo podcast on it. I had started doing WooCommerce news, and then of course I had all my tutorials. Well, when I was talking to somebody, and this came out of the conversation when I was actually getting a little bit stressed about, I've got to do something here. They were talking to me, and they said, you've been in the space a long time. You know a lot of people. You've connected with a lot of people. People are at ease talking with you. There was a lot of different things. And I thought, I've always been part of the community. I've always given what I can to it. And I thought, what if I bring that to the forefront and make that a bigger part of it? And we focused on WooCommerce builders because I was determined to kind of continue the branding and the work I was doing around WooCommerce, because now when you teach somebody how to, get traffic to your e-commerce store, best landing pages, best page builder, there's tons of information out there, and I've contributed to that information through my posts. But I thought where the missing hole was with WooCommerce builders, there's all these people that are kind of in this core WooCommerce community, and then there's everybody else. And all these people, especially now, or even over the last couple of years, 2 or 3 years, want to know what the heck's going on in that community. And I thought, okay, well, my podcast is doing that because I get people on there talking about what they're doing in the space and getting their thoughts on it. And I said, what if I just elaborate on that and essentially create this site where you can learn about what people, not just what's going on in the space, but what people are thinking about, what they're thinking about when something happens, what they're thinking about in anything to do with WooCommerce. So okay, let's do this. So what I did is I portaled over all my news and my podcasts onto the new site. So there's content already existing. The podcast, which has a history in itself, which I won't get into. I think I'm up to like 74, 75 episodes. And I thought, well, how can I expand that? So the podcast is going to add 2 more episodes. It's going to be called Woo Perspectives, and that's going to be every other Tuesday. And that is going to be a small panel similar to what you have here. But I'm going to be simply the moderator and bring in 2 or 3 people from the space and just throw out some topics to them and say, talk about them. Let's hear what you're thinking, the good, the bad, the ugly, whatever. Just for people can hear what's going on and not just, what's being broadcasted out there, but what those individuals are thinking themselves, because they've been working.
But you invite them. You invite them,
yeah.
though. So you still like that. So basically, this is kind of having a podcast.
Yeah, it's basically a podcast. It'll be in the same stream as a regular podcast, so it'll go out in the feed of that. And then the news, I I'm going to be bumping that up. It's a little tough to get a lot of WooCommerce news, but I added a podcast to the news too. So I have this like BBC news music that introduces me, and I'll do short little 2-3 minute on whatever news I'm reporting on. And I'm going to bring in more video, bring in people, I'm kind of taking it like, okay, has anybody really in the WordPress space with news gone mainstream media where, okay, here's the news article, but also I'm talking to Lee because Lee has a few things to say about this news article because he's a pro at this. So I'm going to ping Lee and say, let's do a quick video, 2-3 minutes, bam, we're done, 2-3 questions, just to add your insights to it. So there's that. And then there's a whole bunch of other elements to it if you kind of go through it. But it's all about letting the builders, kind of giving them a space to get their face out there. And also for everybody else to find out who's in this community, who's doing what.
Great. So what's in the Friends tab? Can you go in the Friends tab? I'm just really curious.
And that is one of the monetizations. This is the only thing.
Okay.
So I have sponsors for the podcast, and this is the one way that I monetize it, but it's not the forefront. So I don't call it a membership site because none of the content is behind the paywall. I give them special, like the companies get to be able to list. One of the things I'm putting on this is WooCommerce job listings. So that these people will be able to have, WooCommerce job listings or whatever. And there's a few other benefits. So it's kind of a back-end support type of thing. It's not forefront because I'm also, like I said, got sponsors for the podcast. And I do have an exciting sponsor coming in and joining WooCommerce next week, which I don't know if you want to hear. I'll announce it. It's pretty cool. It's PayPal. So
wow.
They're going to be sponsoring the podcast for actually they're called the community sponsors. So they're sponsoring the whole site and they'll be on board for 6 months.
Whoa. Congrats.
Yeah,
just a small name drop.
There.
Just PayPal.
Does it rub off on us, by the way, if we are now talking to you?
That's pretty awesome. So one very quick question, which is not my main question, but when you say a WordPress builder, I assume that's not a WordPress plugin. Sorry, a WooCommerce builder. It's not a WooCommerce plugin builder. It would be the website
that builds anything, product, services.
Oh, so it's everything. So I could build a WooCommerce website as a web designer / developer, or I could have a WooCommerce product, whatever it is. This is the community for me. This is where I go and learn from other people in the same space as me. And it's where I can find jobs, or I can find the latest news, or I can submit the latest news to you as well.
Yeah.
I don't know, which is pretty cool. And you can curate that and deal with it.
And one thing I'd just like to add, because we were talking about, talking with people, getting ideas for this. And I was saying how many people I talked to. One idea that came out of one of those conversations, and this is the value of it. And I really recommend, especially when you're doing something on this level, to talk to other people in the space that you know. He said, the one thing that's really missing is big brands on WooCommerce. And I said, okay, tell me more about this. And he said, it's not necessarily that we just want to say, hey, look at me as a developer or an agency. I built this brand for so-and-so, which is good because I want to give that exposure too. But it also gives the community arsenal when they go to a client and that client says, hey, who's using WooCommerce? That particular piece, which I'm going to be building on there, they can go through there and say, hey, let me throw out a few names, and they go, oh, okay, then I guess, that does convince me at least that large companies or known companies and known brands are using WooCommerce. So it's everything I do to this. I have to think of one, how I'm exposing maybe isn't the right word, but giving exposure to the builders. Secondly, how am I giving them tools and help in their business itself? So.
I have a follow-up question, not necessarily about this, but it's more that you spent 13 years creating written content, i.e. tutorials, etc. How did you measure the value of what you were doing, and was it that value measurement that was essentially leading to your eventual disdain is the wrong word, but your dislike of doing it and your decision to move into something which is clearly more relational and conversational?
Yeah, I think it was always, the value of it was always, the reason I got into WordPress in 2007 was two-pronged. One is to be able to put content on my site, fresh content. Blog intrigued me. And secondly was to build sites for people that were a lot easier for me to build. I mean, that was why I got into it. So everything I did through those 13 years, content was always a driver to the site, always a driver to get people there, to get people to know whether I was, consulting or coaching or training or doing workshops. It all tied in seamlessly. So it just became a constant stream. And then when podcasting came along in 2014 is when I started doing that. That was another medium. So here's a different piece of content I can mix in. Did that over the years. Right now I'm still doing content in a way because I'm writing news articles, I'm doing podcasts, but I'm hoping I'm answering your question. Content is always a main drive. I mean, that's why I probably call myself a publisher, because no matter what I do, and the fact that we have all these different mediums now, it's like a potpourri. Oh, cool. I can pivot this. Now I can pivot my content. Say, I don't want to do tutorials because they don't work anymore for my new focus, but there is certainly a lot of different ways I can still use content to continue to drive people towards it. And this site really, in a sense, is content driven because of the podcasts, the news, and all of that. Did I answer your question, Lee?
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I was saying was, like, you've been doing the tutorials, for example, which are very different to, say, interviewing and building community. And when I say the value, I guess the value that you were seeing other people were getting from it, because when I see people getting value from the podcast I run, it drives me to continue to do it. So I get maybe 1 or 2 emails a week or messages on Messenger just thanking me for a particular episode. For example, I went live this morning and somebody messaged me on Messenger this afternoon to say they really needed that and that it added value into their lives. They were encouraged by it, or they've made an action, or those sorts of things. And that's what keeps driving me. It's lovely. But that drives me. And I was wondering whether that there was a lack of maybe a feedback loop of, were these tutorials something that were kind of a bit one-sided? You were putting them out, but you weren't necessarily getting that feedback loop.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
versus this, do the woo, which is, sorry, Karen.
That wasn't the reason, because I'll give you an example. One post I did years ago, literally years and years ago, was how to put 2 blogs on a single WordPress site. And all it was a post on creating categories. It was a simple post. I rewrote it 3 or 4 times over the years. I probably had a gazillion visits, and I swear I had at least 700 comments on all the posts. And it was always, oh, this helps so much. So I was getting feedback. I probably didn't get feedback as much as those days because people started commenting less, and I actually took comments off my site because everybody just basically wanted some continued support from whatever I was writing about. So it drove me all through those years, because I would always get feedback, and I don't think it was lack of that feedback that made me make the decision. It was just like, if I just shoot me in the head if I do one more tutorial, please put me out of my. I mean, it was a thing where and at this point in time, when I started writing them, it was not there. I mean, everybody's right. There's so much incredible content out there. There's no lack of content. So anybody that comes to me, whether they're saying, I need a designer, Bob, I need some good content on this, I can find it and point it to them and be happy and say,
can you?
This out.
Because I find sometimes when I'm researching something that it really is of vital importance, I often don't find all the content, which makes me think, well, there's always room for good content.
Oh,
I think you're a bit jaded, Bob.
Yeah.
I think that you've really had enough. I think that's what it is. Everything has been said already. No need. Yeah.
And I think it is. I think there is. And when I see people, writing stuff and, the same stuff that comes around all the time, you think, oh, this has been written about 1 billion times. It is waiting for that good one to come out. Somebody that really.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah.
And you do. There's a lot of stuff out there and there's a lot of garbage. And
it's also the thing.
and I just didn't feel like I was putting the energies that I used to in my content. And that was part of the burnout too, I think.
Yeah.
And it's also the thing with the technical stuff, sorry, Peter, that it gets outdated so quickly. So you're always chasing the latest version and you have to update. Peter, over to you.
No,
Bob, I'm just sending you a hug, by the way. Carry on, guys.
There's a really good question from one of our dearest friends viewing this. And I find it really interesting because it's clearly someone who's reacting to the current situation in the best possible way. This is Kim Nassel Dimado. Forgive me if I say it wrong. Anyway, Kim. And she says that she's in the middle of pivoting from owning our in-person gym personal training, which clearly has gone through some, hurdles lately, obviously, to offering home gym design. Genius. Perfect. Should I reach out to my friends, clients first to get the word out, any other way before a big launch? Should she just go or wait till the website is ready? I got quite excited about this comment because I can feel, she's got an interior design degree, so she knows how to design this. She knows what to do. And I already told her what she should do, but I want to know your opinion.
Well, yeah, I think, definitely, get some people behind you to get the word out. I did that myself. I do it with everything I do, some more than others. I mean, that's, any teasers you can put out there to let people know what's on horizon. I mean, some of the stuff seems, natural or obvious, but not all of us, are doing it all the time. So it doesn't come natural. And get those, especially those people that just love it, and anything you can help them to help promote you, and I'm sure the three of you have been there where, sometimes it's like, even if you need to send them some blurbs or something, it's always nice to have people say things from their gut if they're comfortable. But some people are so busy. It's just like, give me something and I'll shoot this out for you. So definitely. I tell her, I strongly suggest, as far as putting the site up before launch, that's I've done it both ways. This site that I was live has been live for three weeks. And let me explain to her why I did that, because, most people will not do that. And I've not done it in the past. I did it because, and Lee may be able to relate to this, is I had to transfer my podcast feed over there, and it was a freaking nightmare. It's supposed to be seamless and you get it reconnected. So there was technical things that I wanted to get in place, and I had a lot of content. So when you're creating a news site, I think it's great because you have that advantage to launch and tease people and get a landing page up there to get people interested, be notified however you want to do that, to maybe start driving them to the URL, but not actually looking at the site. But, technically, when you're moving content from another site, you've got a lot of redirects, a lot of things. So I had to make sure that Google was not freaking out. It's like, where did this go temporarily? So I had to have something live and try to hush. So
I dropped off the face of the earth, mate, when I changed my feed.
So it's like it can be a nightmare. But I don't think I would ever launch it if it's a brand new site. If I wouldn't launch it, there may be, and I'm sure some of you might have some instances where there would be an exception, but it would be nice to have at least somewhere to start driving people to get them a little bit excited about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the same time, just go for it. Just go for it. Don't because the other side to that is waiting until things are perfect, which they never are. So, taking imperfect action can be extremely rewarding as well. So well done for pivoting. I think it's a great pivot that Kim did.
Oh,
sorry,
yeah,
Lee, I interrupted you.
And that's
it's all right. Oh, carry on, Bob.
Oh, I was just going to say, and that's some of the challenges with these pivots is letting it just simmer. You're just thinking, okay, you're almost like waiting some magical dust to come out and hype you up or something, and weren't the right time, or you're waiting, just like you said, that is it not perfect? I mean, I set dates, and it had to be whatever by that date because I had already told people and made it. And that's good. It's scary saying, this is launch date, people expected, and you got to be ready to go. And I was, I actually redesigned the homepage this weekend. I don't think I like this. It's like, oh, great, Bob. Now you're doing this, 2 days before. But it's very, you gotta just go for it. And I've done that a lot with these pivots. And sometimes, like I said, they failed. But, if you're not flexible, and in her case, she's got a circumstance due to what's happening right now. And it's something you don't want to just, try to make it too perfect, because you got to get it out there. You got to do
it. You got to, yeah. And she was asking also, what I've got friends I could do it for. Should I do it for free? Now, no, I would say no. Why would you do it for free? No,
we all shook our heads.
I mean, seriously, it just no good can come from it. I think that, I speak for myself, but no good has ever come of me doing anything for free. Apart from pro bono stuff, that's a completely different story. But you're going to do a very good job for them. So why would you? And even mates rates, that's a whole different kind of words. But when you're doing mates rates, basically you being a really good mate to them, but they're being a really bad mate to you. That's the So, but we're friends. Yes, no, I'm your friend. You're not my friend. So yeah.
With regards to that as well, Kim, what I'd recommend is you've got an idea, you want to go ahead and do something. Like Bob and Peter are saying, don't go for a fully completed website where people can order your full home gym design service, etc. You can get away with a landing page with your key message. Your key message being, hey, target client avatar, you have this particular problem, I have this particular solution. If you can back it up with imagery, with examples, with past testimonials, that is freaking awesome as well. And then give them something that they can order. We all shook our heads at the same time when it was talking about free. So give them something. You can give them something of free value, like the 5 steps to the best home gym design. Now I'm making stuff up now. I know nothing about home gym. I've got a few extra pounds. I probably need your help. But
she has the landing page up already.
Has she got it up?
Yeah, as a dedicated page on the website, which I think is the best way to approach this, so that you're not building a full new website without having tested your concept.
And then you can actually offer a productized service, a simple version or a part of your service, not the full thing. But if you want to start testing the idea and getting some money in and getting some testimonials, if there is a small part of it that you can offer a consultancy or something as a small productized package, then you can start to validate that there is an appetite for it and build up some sort of small customer base where you can say, hey, look, we've worked with such and such and we were able to guide them in the right direction for their home gym design, etc. It's kind of how I started Angled Crown years ago. I started without a website, but was doing very small productized services on a landing page on the back of an existing website, which sounds like exactly what you're doing.
So, in fact, Kim, before you start talking to people, you don't know whether that's what they want, because they may say, you know what, I can't be bothered with a home gym, but I would love Zoom classes from you. Do you know what I mean? You don't know. That's a valid. So Bob was saying earlier that sometimes asking is good and sometimes it isn't. I think that what you were talking about, Bob, when it isn't so good, is when people start, design by committee, when everybody has an opinion, but really they don't know what you're talking about. In the case of your own customer, or potential clients, definitely ask them, because you want to give them what they want. So you may think that it's a brilliant idea, but I would probably tell you, look, well, my flat is too small, but I do need you as a trainer. So can we do it on Zoom? Something like that. You just don't know. Or maybe people will say, yeah, yes, please. I can't wait for you to design my gym, but ask first.
Awesome. Well, folks, I'm afraid it is that time. The sad time where we come into land. But I would love to share with you a couple of big takeaways that I've had from this call. Oh, we've lost Peacher. Oh, no, we've got Peacher back. Right, there's a couple of takeaways I'd love
too excited.
Yes,
because
the
you
computer
said
got too
coming
excited.
into land. Because you said coming into land. I was like, yeah, please say. We missed it so much.
I always say it. Sorry. Okay.
We missed it so much.
There are a few takeaways that I've got from this. Sometimes I only get one, but the first thing is that there is a pivot and there is a pivot. So you can pivot a small element of what you do to improve it and to evolve it, or you can do a huge 180 and change something significantly. So a pivot is for you because it comes in all sorts of shapes and sizes. The next takeaway that I have from this is that external changes can have they're a massive factor in your decision to pivot. So, for example, we are living in times where many of us just have to pivot in some way to be able to weather the storm of COVID, because some businesses cannot carry out what they used to do and have to change. So, there are, those times. Bob, kind of mid call, shared, experiences of where he's gone down a path and then realized it's the wrong path. And one of the takeaways I got from that as well was simply that it's okay to stop and to not continue pursuing something for the sake of pursuing something. So when Bob says, yes, I've pivoted a few times, it sounds like at one point there was a point where Bob went down a track, realized it wasn't right, and then went off in a different direction. So that wasn't necessarily a pivot. It was the wrong track. And I've done the same with, say, I launched the Digital Renaissance podcast earlier this year and then realized that was completely the wrong direction to go in. It wasn't something I was excited about. It was something I thought was clever, but actually it was a waste of time, and I instantly pulled it after about 6 episodes and thought, stop. No, this is a distraction. I don't love it, and it doesn't serve the real direction I want to go in. And that was what Bob was sharing. It's okay to stop. Even if you've put 7 months into it, like Bob shared, it's still okay to say, I don't think this is right. I need to try something else. Because Bob could have thrashed that for the next 7 months further and got really stressed out, couldn't you, mate, and burnt out with the whole process, but took that decision to stop. So they were the biggest takeaways I got from this. We've also had a nice look at dothewoo.io. So I would recommend, folks, if you can go and check that out. If you are in e-commerce, in WooCommerce, be you a plugin builder, be you somebody who uses the product, be you somebody who builds websites with WooCommerce, dothewoo.io is the place for you to go. That rhymed on purpose. And check it out on iTunes, on Spotify, on Google Play, and all of those, and hit that subscribe button. And please encourage Bob with a tweet and like and a share, which will be phenomenal, because Bob has been podcasting for donkey's years and frankly has got the best voice on the airwaves if you want to go ahead and listen to it. So what we will do, folks, is we're going to go around the table so that people can learn how we can connect with each other, and then we will let everyone go. So why don't we start with Bob? How can people connect with you? Obviously via this website, but also what are your socials?
Yeah, well, I will let you know that bobwp.com still does exist. It has a bunch of old WooCommerce tutorials, so that site will continue to lead the way. It'll probably turn into a personal blog at some time, but yeah, basically just Google Bob WP. No paths lead to me. Basically, once you've
all
done
roads lead to Bob
everywhere under that moniker.
Awesome. Peacher, how do people connect with you? You're on mute.
Right.
Take two.
If you know how to spell my name, you can find me. PICCIA. surname N-E-R-I. That's it. I mean, I've said it before. I mean, on my handle on Twitter is Peacher, because I'm also ancient and I signed up, was among the first to sign up. Anyway, you can find me there, also on LinkedIn, Peachanarian, on my Facebook group, Design for Geeks.
Awesome. How about you, Jan?
The best place is my WP Mastery Facebook group.
WP Mastery Facebook group. I just want to put this on screen because I'm so jealous of that. My name's Lee. It definitely doesn't exist for me. I think it's the jeans company. Look at that. Twitter.com/Peacher. WP Mastery Facebook group. And what's the summit website URL? Because that's next week.
It's WPAgencySummit.com.
WPAgencySummit.com. I highly recommend it.
Over 4,000 people subscribed.
How many? 4,000?
4,000 in total, yeah.
Join
Amazing.
4,000 people in the community to learn to level up your agency. WPAgencySummit.com.
Yep.
WPAgencySummit.com, folks. Check that one out. And finally, if you want to listen to me rambling on, then you can check me out over on agencytrailblazer.com. And I go live every day over on leematthewjackson.com/live, where I have a rant about stuff, because I'm at that age now where I can rant about stuff and it's fine. So, with that said, let's wrap up with a final nod and a wink to our wonderful guest, Bob. You can check out his podcast over on dothewoo.io, and also just put in Bob WP into Google and you'll find him because he's very well known. And with that, we will do the cheesy wave. Bob straight in there with the cheesy wave for us. All right, folks, thanks. Take care. If you're watching the replay, please type in the word